Well, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Uneducated and Untrained Pastor, and I'm your host, Pastor Ronnie Qualls, where we are also I got the unrehearsed and unscripted podcast, also the unedited and unfiltered program. So, I don't know, I'm kind of known for being a little bit on the blunt side and just kind of, say it the way I think it. And I don't ever want to be offensive in any way. So if anything I say, maybe offends you or ruffles your feathers, I'll apologize, and you can just try to get over it, and we'll be good together. How's that work? So, no, I want to just talk to you today. What is on my mind this morning is simply this: preacher, you need friends. You need pastor friends, is what you need. And so I want to talk to you about that, because what I hear a lot of times from pastors is simply this. People talk about just feeling alone, being lonely, isolated, feeling like here they are, and the church is over there, and I'm over here, and I don't really have no fellowship. Well, not only that, but oftentimes you might be a part of an association, or you might be a standalone church, and you may not know other pastors in the area. Preacher, I want you to know something. You need preacher friends. And I want to tell you why you need that. Because you are lonely, because you feel isolated a lot of times. You feel like maybe you're going through struggles and you just have no one to talk to about it. The first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about fellowship. You need fellowship. You need it with just every Christian, but you really need fellowship with other preachers. Okay? Why? Because, when you have that, you have somebody that you can communicate with. You can deal with these things. I'll tell you this. I've got preacher friends in several different places. They're not all the same, like in their personality and such. I mean, some guys they sound a lot more intelligent than I sound. Other guys, I may sound more intelligent than them. I mean, sometimes it's that way. But the thing is, man, I've got a whole slug full of just friends that are pastors, preachers. I mean, some are evangelists, missionaries. But man, I got to tell you something. It's good when you have this, that you can have, this friendship and such. I have a good friend, Harold Smith. He's known as the Backwoods Baptist, and I'll just be honest with you, it's probably my favorite podcast on YouTube. It is the greatest intro theme song. I mean, I love it. I will just sometimes just go listen to that because I just get a kick out of it. But man, I thank the world for Brother Harold, and he for several years did a conference. Now, don't get all excited. He stopped doing it at the present time for various reasons, but it was called the Preachers of Grace Conference. And what was in his mind when he did it was simply that he was going to invite preachers that were like-minded to come together for, about 3 or 4 days. There was going to be about, 7 or 8 preachers through that time. Now, not everybody got to preach. He would usually call ahead of time and just say, hey, I'd like for you to preach if you want to. And I was really privileged and blessed to get to do that. I got to go the last 3 years of it, and I got to preach in one of those. And I guess I preached, and after that, he's like, well, we ain't going to do that again. No, but there were so many guys that, that probably never did get to preach, and it really just had to do with there's just so many. But what that was really for was it was so that pastors could come together and meet other pastors, hopefully develop friendships, and just get to know one another. And why do we do these things? Well, I'll just tell you this. Preacher, if you're pastoring a church, if you're a missionary on a mission field, I'll promise you this: everybody's going through some type of difficulty. The sad thing is, these young preachers come out here and they're looking for that church that has no problems. There's no strife, no struggles in your church. Listen, friend, if you got people in your church, there's always going to be problems. Sometimes you might be the problem. Even the pastor can be the problem. But here's what you need. You need, and this is the second point. The first one was we need fellowship. You need encouragement. You need other men around you that will encourage you. I'll tell you one of the things I loved, at the Preachers of Grace conference was you got to sit around. They fed you when you came, so you'd sit on a round table, and there'd be about several couples on there, 4 or 5, and you got to visit with these other pastors, and wives got to visit with wives and such, and it was really good. It was encouraging because you might be going through a tough time, and you might you just start sharing some things you're dealing with. And they'd say, brother, man, I've been there, or it could be them telling you things and you had been there. And so there was this encouragement and sometimes, you get each other's numbers and you can call one another and just say, hey, brother, how's it going? That issue you was dealing with, how's it going? And man, so many times I've been like, man, that's not an issue no more. I mean, man, we were able to get through that and there's rejoicing there. So, not only can you encourage one another in just issues you're dealing with, but you can share just experiences you've had from, your testimony of how you became a Christian, that how you were called into the ministry. There's these things, I remember sitting at a table with some brothers, and it was out in Arkansas. It was, once again, it's Harold. He has a pastor's lunch once a month, and we went out there one time. I went out there one time, and it might have been the first time I ever went. I believe it was. And so the guys didn't really know me very well. I think I'd gone to the Preachers of Grace conference, and then I'd gone to this lunch. So, these guys didn't really know me very well at all. And somebody asked me, like, what was my background? Was I raised in church? And I wasn't. I didn't grow up going to church. And long story short, but when I told them my testimony, there's a brother named Brandon White, and he's just one of the best preachers I know and everything. But he had tears in his eyes, and he said, man, that's just a testimony of a trophy of God's grace. And man, it hit me pretty heavy, when he said that, and it meant something to me. And the thing of it is you have those things. You can share those experiences, good, bad, and indifferent. And and let me just say this: Brandon does a conference every year. I think it's like in February or so, and he calls it Jubilee. And I don't think it's just for preachers, but there's a lot of preachers there. I mean, we're talking a bunch. And I got to go to that this past year, or this year, what we're in, 24. And I was blessed again he asked me to preach one time, but I got to meet a lot of different guys, and it was just a joy. I mean, there's such good fellowship and all that. And so, you get to share experience with one another. So, you need that kind of encouragement. And I'll just tell you this, there's probably somebody out of the, probably 5 people watching this that you may be in that time of your life where, man, it's like, I don't have any preacher friends. I don't have that. And this may be speaking to you right now, and you need that. Listen, send a comment. I mean, you may be a long ways away, but, you can meet people, through messaging. You can meet people through a phone call or whatever. But I promise you, you need fellowship. You need encouragement. Well, here's another thing that you need. You need people in your life that are going to hold you accountable. You really can't truly be friends unless you can shoot straight with one another. That sometimes you see your friends, and I got a good friend, Brady Brewer, and Brady and he's a pastor now. Pastors a small church. He qualifies for the uneducated and untrained pastor. He's just like me, okay? And I love Brady to death. And but I met Brady. Somebody had told me about him, and vice versa. Me and a brother named Justin Wright had started kind of doing street ministry. Now, we hadn't done any open air preaching, but we was doing a lot of one-on-ones and things like that, handing out tracts. Well, So the first night that we meet Brady, we're up in Oklahoma City, and anyway, street preaching, and I mean, it was packed. It was the NBA playoffs were going on. The Thunder's playing the Lakers, or some kind of big arts festival. I've never seen so many people out there at Bricktown in Oklahoma City. Well, anyway, down through the time, I started going with Brady at different times. When I was able to go with him, I'd go preach with him, and we'd go do open air preaching. Well, there was one day, we was at the bus station, and he'd been telling me about these, I don't know, they call themselves Hebrew Israelites or something, and basically anybody that's of a darker shade of tan, they don't like white guys, We're like the devil. Anyway, he had been kind of talking to these guys, and one day, man, he just kind of called one of them out, and I mean, boy, he got pretty intense, And I was thinking, man, what's he doing? Well, long story short, when we left, I was like, brother, man, what happened? He goes, man, those guys just, he said, it aggravates me so much. And listen, after getting to experience them some, I fully understand his frustration and aggravation. You've never seen such twisting of scriptures like these guys do, talking over you, acting like they want to have a dialogue. So, I mean, it's very frustrating. But what I said, brother, God didn't send us down here to argue with those guys. We're down here to preach the gospel. Now, I want to make something very clear. Brady is one of the best street preachers I've ever known. I mean, there's a lot of good ones out there, but man, that guy's he's one of the best. And so it was, in no way was I like, but it was just a thing that he thanked me for that, And listen, I'm going to tell you something. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of times when brothers come to me, pastors come to me and say, hey, brother, you're getting out of line there. You're frustrated, but you need to dial it back a little bit. Now, I'm just going to tell you straight up, no one really likes it initially when a fellow pastor or something just says, hey, what you're doing isn't good. But I want you to know something. This happens where there's true friendship. Okay? And I'm going to tell you something else. You absolutely need this in your life, because no one has it right all the time. Matter of fact, I'll be willing to say you ain't got it right any of the time. I mean, all right. So, but when we're really getting out of bounds, we need somebody there in our life to hold us accountable. We need people that will just shoot straight. But here's the thing. You need people around you. When you're talking about accountability, you need men that you can trust. Okay? You need good brothers and such. And I mean, there's a lot of guys that I know that I have a lot of respect for, that I probably wouldn't share everything that with them that I would those that are closest to me. So what's going to happen is you're going to get to meet pastors and such. And I can't tell you the magical formula of how you get really close. I mean, there is an opening up and a sharing of things, It's just like, I mentioned Harold Smith. I didn't really know Harold. I mean, I had heard him preach, different things. So little by little, we got to know each other more and more. Well, when I came to the church I'm at here at Bowlegs, I called Harold and I picked his brain a lot, because I knew enough, I'd heard enough that it seemed kind of similar to what I was in. And so I wanted to talk to a brother that had already been down the road that I was about to hit. And now there's things he told me that I had already done different. I'd already done maybe opposite of what his advice was. And that's something we'll talk about in another time, but see, here's the thing. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean that's what you should do. But what you're getting is you're getting somebody else with a different viewpoint, a different insight from their own personal experience of how they dealt with situations. So, and through that, I thank the world of Harold. I can bounce things off of him, and we can talk and discuss. And where I was pastor at over at Sovereign Grace in Ada, Oklahoma. I was in a plurality of elders there, and I had three other elders, Randy Tyler, Justin Wright, and Paul Wilson. And these guys, man, I mean, they encouraged, they also held me accountable, and vice versa. I still stay in touch with every one of those guys. I mean, not maybe every week or so, but I mean, but it's still. And any time we get together, it's just like a homecoming of family, And I thank the Lord for those guys. And so, you know, I have fellowship with them. I've got encouragement, and accountability. And so, the last thing I want to talk about is you need men, and this would go right along with these things, but I'm just calling this point. I'm calling it iron sharpening iron. Um, there, as you grow in the Lord, and listen, you'll never stop doing that. You'll never stop learning. Um, I mean, you may, think that you have a great understanding on prayer. Harold sent me a book a while back. It was about a brother named Brother Halleck. He was a preacher, a pastor up in Norman, Oklahoma years ago. He's passed on. He's with the Lord now, but he told me about a book, and I ordered it, and it was on prayer, and it had a little bit of different insights and things that I had never saw, and so there's always things that this iron sharpening iron, to where what we're doing is sometimes just on our doctrine. Um, it's like we get kind of stagnant or something, and maybe something comes, we're reading, and a thought comes to our mind, and what you're able to do is you're able to bounce these ideas off of other men, and it's like, am I getting off base here, and so you've got this iron sharpening iron. I like to tell this story a lot of times. My church makes fun of me for telling stories a lot, but let me tell you something. They're good ones, okay? So I'm not going to stop, just so y'all will know. But this was a guy that I knew, and he had been in construction for years. And the reason I'm telling this is for this reason. You're never too old to learn. You're never, too experienced that somebody can't teach you something, and sometimes it could be somebody that's a very young minister. Well, this was in construction, and this guy, who's a little bit older than I am, he'd been a general contractor. He'd done some big jobs and such. And he had this young kid that just got out of high school. He's 18 years old. He's a big old whopper of a kid, and a just good natured kid, real chill. And but what happened was they was doing this work, and they was finishing up some trim, and they were using trim screws instead of nailer, and it was oak, and this was high dollar stuff. I mean, they're getting right down to the finish of the job. It's payday coming on, and this guy gets this screw going in, and the head breaks off of it. Well, the guy that had been the contractor for so long, he's freaking out. He's like, and the kid standing there, he goes, well, what's the problem? And he goes, well, the head just broke off. He said and he's just in panic mode. That's kind of his nature a little bit. And the young kid, the big old, 260, 70 pound kid, he just kind of starts chuckling. And the guy, the boss, gets mad. He goes, what do you think so funny? And he goes, let me see your drill. So he says, what are you going to do? He said, just give me your drill. So he takes the drill, he unchucks, the bit, and he cinches up the chuck now on the screw, the broken screw, cinches it up, tightens it up, puts it in reverse, and backs it out. And the guy that had done this for years, it's just one of those things, he'd never thought about that. And so the point is, you can always learn. I don't care how long you've been preaching. So there's always this iron sharpening iron. You might go into a place where, here's the way that you have done church service, let's say it like that. Maybe you do a certain way, you have a way that you've done it, but you're going into a church and they do it differently. Now, I'll just tell you this, it's easier for one person to change the course of the way they do things than for 70 or 80 people to change the course and fit one person. And that's things you'll run into as you go into pastor churches. And as long as things aren't unbiblical, sometimes these are not a hill to die on. Maybe you sing a song, read scripture, sing some more songs. Maybe, you go to a place they don't do that. Now, when I came here, they didn't do that. And it was one of those things I just said, hey, I'd like to do that. Everybody was good with it. But the point I'm trying to make is just the method of the way you do some things. You can call other pastors and say, explain to me why this. I know in a lot of Baptist churches, they have a time in the worship and singing. They have a time they call meet and greet. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. I ain't a big fan of meet and greet. I feel like what meet and greet was like, hey, we've got to beat the other churches to the restaurants after church, so we just need to get this meet and greet done in the service. I'm just going to tell y'all this is Ron's assessment of meet and greet, because there wasn't a whole lot of people actually coming by and meeting me and greeting me. They kind of did. But it was like, how are you doing, or welcome, and they just go on. Well, there wasn't much of a meeting or greeting there. I mean, and then when church was over, it was over. Now, they did that here at Bowlegs, but I preached so long the first several times that the worship leader, who's now one of my co-elders, Rodney Tribal, he said, I've got to cancel that meet and greet. This guy's preaching too long. So there's how you can get rid of the meet and greet, Pastor. You can just preach some really long sermons, and people can't get to the restaurant in time, and they'll have to get rid of something. They may get rid of you. You never know. You got to be careful there. Anyway, but on this iron sharpening iron, you can doctrinal things, methodology. If you want to use that big fancy word, makes me sound educated, doesn't it? But just ideas. You can run these across somebody else, because I want to tell you something. It's a dangerous place to be in when you think you have all the answers. And when I say that, I don't mean it's like you're sitting there thinking, I don't need anybody, I've got all the answers. But when a guy is isolated and he doesn't have anything to bounce these things off of, you start falling into a very dangerous place without realizing it, that you start thinking that the way that you think, the way that you do things is the only way. And then somebody comes along and they question that, and that's when you're going to realize that you've gotten into a dangerous place, because it's going to ruffle your feathers. So you always want to have people. So we'll just go back over these points. I mean, you need fellowship. There's your first one. You need fellowship with other preachers. And I thank the Lord for the men that I know that are in the pastorate, that I can call, I can go visit, sit down and just, listen, there's sometimes that you are on serious things. But with these men, sometimes it's just getting together with friends, and there's some camaraderie. There's gigging each other. There's, we'll make fun of each other, and, not like crazy but I can't even tell you the last discussion I had. I'll say that had to do with body parts on a raccoon, and kids comparing body parts of a raccoon in class when they were kids in school. And I was like, oh, Lord, guys, my wife ain't gonna let me come back to this if if this is what we're talking about. And if you were there, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the thing of it is, man, we have a good time when we get together. It's where you can kind of just relax a little bit. And you can just, you don't got to put your guard up. And let me just say this. Now this podcast is primarily for the uneducated and untrained pastor, the guy out there in the small churches out there in the middle of nowhere, or in the middle of town, and you're just a small church and you're struggling. I want to try to encourage you. But if you're just a member of a church, you need friends. These same things. You need fellowship. You need encouragement. You need accountability. You need iron sharpening iron, you need those things too. And I want to say this. If you're a member of a church, and okay, I want to make this clear. If you're a brother in a church, guess what? You can be friends with your pastor. You can go do things together. And don't think your pastor is just some super Christian that, he's always speaking like, oh thou, blessed brother of mine. No. Listen, man, he's just a guy too. I don't try to be anybody I'm not. I may not sound very smart, but I am smart enough to know I don't sound real smart. I've tried to work on it. I used to, try to say things a little differently, but guess what? This is who I am. Providentially, this is how God allowed me to be made up. This is the way I talk. I probably sound about the same way when I preach. I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. I'm who God made me to be. And so that's what you're going to get. And so in that, I'm very thankful for all the friends, the pastor friends, and I've got friends, that are just brothers in my church. And I don't mean that like they're just brothers, but what I mean is they're not pastors, but I'm very thankful for the times that I can just, get with these guys and we can talk and shoot the breeze. And sometimes it gets more of a serious nature and we can talk about serious things, serious questions. But pastor friend, I just want to encourage you today that you need friends. I go to these association meetings sometimes, and we had one of the guys one day just said, "Hey, how can we be in more fellowship?" This guy felt like he's kind of alone. He said he had one other church in the town he was in, and it was a Free Will Baptist church out of all things. Can you believe that? And but he said, man, that pastor, he said, I have good fellowship with him. Now, what he was saying was he wanted more fellowship with the guys in his own denomination. And I understand that. But hey, you know what? Enjoy the guy that the Free Will Baptist down the corner, man. If you're having good fellowship with him, have fellowship with him. Talk about Jesus. But the thing of it is my answer to him was this. I said, you're going to have to be intentional. You're going to have to make some effort to do this. It ain't just going to fall on your head. Now, I know God could bring somebody, but most likely you're going to have to somewhat be intentional. Well, that's all I've got for you on this episode. My prayer for you is that, brother, you just keep preaching the word, be faithful. I don't care if you've got seminary training or you don't. You love the people that God has put in front of you. You preach the word faithfully, and you leave the results up to God. You just be faithful in what God has called you to do. This is your host, Pastor Ronnie Qualls, and I am signing off for now, and I will see you next time. God bless each one.